Welcome to the Magnolia Shine podcast, and we got something new this week that we're going to be doing every single Tuesday as long as we're still living here on Earth. The Jackson State report, we were doing the Southern Miss report on Mondays, and then we'll start building this up as we go. But this is Wilton Jackson, and he's a Jackson native, and I think you guys know his face. And Mr. Jackson, tell us about being from the city of Jackson.
You know, Blake, like being from Jackson has always been good, man. Like I said, I went to Jim Hill High School, been in Jackson all my life. Obviously went off to school at Southern Miss and LSU and even end up coming back to Jackson State to get a second master's degree. But I mean, I'm Jackson through and through. I mean, that's you know that about me.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's obvious here what we got to talk about right from the jump, and that's that new football schedule. There was rumors swirling. I'd like to say I was the first one in Jackson to break that Las Vegas news that they were going to go play Grambling out there. So tell me, what were your initial thoughts with this schedule? I thought it was a pretty clean schedule. I think the Las Vegas game is unique, but otherwise it's a lot cleaner than maybe some other years.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I think about the opportunity for Jackson State to actually go play Grambling. One thing I've noticed about Jackson State fans, they love to travel. And to be able to go to the West Coast, to go to Vegas, to play a historic blue blood HBCU program like Grambling, I think it's a win on both sides, if you ask me, because obviously Jackson State coming off of a championship this past season, obviously looking to rebuild and build on that coming into 2025. So I think it's going to be an exciting time. I think it's going to definitely be a good game. And just more broadly, when you look at their schedule, they start off playing Hampton. That's, in the CAA. That's a team that, has been historically, in the mix, not necessarily having the best years, but been in the mix amongst the top HBCU programs throughout football season amongst the HBCU ranks. And then that weekend, now, my allegiance, clearly I'm from Jackson, but undergrad I went to Southern Miss. So that's going to be a little tricky that second week of the season, that first weekend in September. But, between that, Tuskegee, Southern, they play Southern early this year. That's a difference. You know what I mean? Like that's a game that typically, usually falls somewhere in between like October and November. So I thought it was interesting that they put that Southern game in September there.
Yeah, one of the big notes for me was the two byes. I think that's always good for teams in college football, especially an FCS school that may have to play an FBS school at some point. You talk about Southern Miss. It's always good to have that double bye, especially if you're going to play up in competition, which Jackson State does, and most of the FCS schools have to do just to, help with funding.
Yeah.
So let's start early. Hampton, you say that's a good team to start, and then we move to Southern Miss. Last year, this might have been a game. I mean,
absolutely.
This year I know fans are excited. What are your thoughts on Jack State maybe having a shot?
So I kind of stand with you in what you're saying there as far as like it would have been it would have for sure probably been a much closer game this past season if the two teams would have played. I think that this year you're going to get obviously you get a new coach at Southern Miss in their football program. Obviously, you're going to get a Jackson State team that's going to be very much motivated and encouraged to come and play that game in Hattiesburg. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a blowout like it's going to be like Southern Miss wins by 60. But I do think that obviously Southern Miss is going to get the win. But I think Jackson State is going to give a good outing and at least a good showing in front of Southern Miss fans.
Yeah, and you know what? They'll possibly have half the fans there. I mean, their side will be full. And I know Southern Miss has a new coach, but at the same time, sometimes they have some ticket attendance problems with their football program. And
true.
Jack State has never had that problem, especially even on the.
They've had that problem in certain eras.
Correct. In recent memories.
Oh, no, not in recent. No, not recent. Not recent at all.
Since I've been in Mississippi, they haven't had an attendance problem. But I will say, Southern Miss fans will lose their mind if Jackson State fans win, and Jack State will just not let it go on social media. That will be one of those days where those Southern Miss fans would just have to get off social media. But honestly, I mean, look, I have no bones about it. I think Southern Miss is going to win that game. Don't hate on me, but I give you my picks. I told you they win the conference last year. It is my pick. All right, as we move down the schedule, you see the two byes, middle of the schedule. What are you thinking?
So that bye between them playing Tuskegee and going into Southern, I think that's very critical because you're talking about a Southern team that just essentially played in the SWAC championship, this past year. So you're thinking to yourself like you're playing a team that's obviously Division II in Tuskegee, but one of the better teams amongst Division II teams, in their league. So do I think Jackson State wins that game against Tuskegee? I do. But it definitely helps to get a bye going into a big game like Southern. And not only are you playing Southern, you're playing Southern on the road. And if you know anything about playing Southern at A.W. Mumford Stadium, it's a hard place to play in. Basically like how, other SWAC schools feel about playing Jackson State at the Vet. So having to getting that bye, I think is a good thing for them.
Yeah, Alabama had been doing that for years before they played Auburn. They would play an FCS school because they wanted a quote unquote bye, as Syracuse alum Nick Wright says, better than a bye,
Right.
which is playing an inferior opponent. And for them, they played Division II, then a bye, then Southern. If they had any early injuries, they might have 2 weeks to get prepared for it. Where are the biggest hiccups you're looking at on this schedule? Like is it a Grambling game in Vegas because there's a lot going on and it's tough to keep your team focused when there's a slot and blackjack table nearby?
Yeah, that you bring up a valid point because honestly, when I look at the Tuskegee and then the bye and then Southern, I think they're going to be well prepared for Southern. Believe it or not, though, that Alabama A&M game that's been played in Mobile over the last couple of years, that could be an interesting game because now they have a new head coach in Sam Shade, who came from Miles College. So Alabama A&M won't be the same Alabama A&M team that we've seen in Conor Maynard. This is I certainly feel, again, I'm not putting anything out there that Alabama A&M is going to win the SWAC East or the SWAC at all. However, this for sure will be a different Alabama A&M team. So that game could be at a neutral site. That game could be maybe in hiccup. I don't see the Alabama State game being a hiccup because there's just so much energy still there between those two teams.
That's where I wanted to stop you. Did you think that game was scheduled for the festivities? I mean, was that on purpose? I mean, that felt personal.
Yeah, no, it did. It did, and so go ahead.
No, I was saying it's personal. The way they scheduled that Alabama State game was personal.
No, it was. No, it definitely was, and it's just like anytime I think about Jackson State and Alabama State, you could even see it last year. The energy, the effort amongst players, once obviously on the field, that's a game that still has some undertones that still need to be handled. That's the best way to put it. Exactly.
I mean, that's why I think it's personal, because some teams go about homecoming where they want an automatic win, or there are some schools in the SWAC you schedule your homecoming for, although I know they've kind of changed it in recent years where they've kind of like set up certain dates that certain teams have it so that it was, people could go or however the SWAC decided to do that. But when you schedule an opponent like Alabama State for a game like that, to me that breeds confidence, but it also is, oh, we want this. Because Alabama State did it the other way too.
Yep. They scheduled Jackson State for their homecoming. But I think more so than anything, when you look at a coach like T.C. Taylor and the level that this program is sitting at right now, they're not going to back down from a challenge. If anything, after Jackson State winning a championship, a SWAC championship, and now the Celebration Bowl last year, the confidence is through the roof. There is a standard that has been set. And if you talk to anybody around the Jackson State football program, they're looking to continue that standard. And to be able to continue that standard, you beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. And obviously putting Alabama State there is a sign that Jackson State is not lacking in confidence at all.
Before we move to the back end of that schedule, I'm just happy with Alabama A&M. I don't have to hear someone barking like a dog anymore, or a bulldog.
Or or Deion leaving scooters on the field.
You know what? It's nice that game may just be about football this time.
That's true.
All right, back into the schedule. Give me your thoughts.
So back end of the schedule, we're looking at Grambling. Obviously, that game is in Las Vegas. Going to be a good game. I hope on both sides that both teams are focused because to your point of what you said, the Las Vegas Strip, if for those who've never been, it's a lot of trouble that you can get into in Las Vegas. I mean, it's Sin City for a reason, right? So
let me say something. If the Sonic Boom doesn't go down the Las Vegas Strip, then it wasn't the trip.
That's true. I 1,000% agree with you on that. I'm pretty sure they're gonna at least. I wouldn't be surprised if they march down the Strip.
They got to.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, here's the thing: if you can march in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, you can march in Vegas.
But what I said to Dr. Little is I said once you did the Super Bowl, you knew that there was probably never going to again be, as big as it was. I mean, we're talking 100 million viewers, and the J is at the Super Bowl, and I'm like, look, you might have hit the pinnacle. I'm sorry. I don't know what more you want. Do you want to play for I don't know, like a world event? It's still, but the Super Bowl is a world event. I mean, I know it's big in America, but goodness gracious. All right, back to the games. You got Alcorn Valley. I mean, tell us what your thoughts are.
So you have, now that game after Grambling, they have to go to Bragg Memorial and play FAMU. I can assure you, as a FAMU team that lost at the end of the season in their own merit, but then also lost to Jackson State at home, I can assure you, Rattler fans are going to have that game scheduled. They're going to have that game circled on their schedule right now, for sure.
They knew they were playing them, and they just said, "What's the date? We'll be there."
For sure.
That will be. I mean, look, if you were going to nationally televise a non-traditional game during this season, right? If a ESPN, a CBS, an NBC, right, was going to broadcast a Grambling Southern or games like that, a Jack State Alcorn, that would be the one.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Of non-traditional rivalries per se, the FAMU Jack State game would be the one I would put on TV, because if there was going to be extra, it would be that game.
Oh, for sure. And it's going to, 9 times out of 10, I don't see FAMU having somewhat of a rebuild down year last year in 2025. I definitely think they're going to be on their way back up, and I think that they're going to still be obviously a threat to potentially win the SWAC East. But then after FAMU, you get Mississippi Valley, who also has a new coach, and Jackson State has to go to Mississippi Valley this year. So we'll see if Mississippi Valley can notice what I'm about to say, put 2 halves together to win a game, because typically they play the first half decent.
But now that they've fixed the grass there, it's an even playing field, and I think that's a big win for Jackson State.
Well, even if they hadn't fixed the playing field, I'm looking at the actual players that will be playing on that playing field. What I know, and you've seen this too, Valley is not a team that, well, granted, wins and losses, they're bad. But at the same time, if you look at some of their games a lot closely, like this is a team that typically stands with or plays with other teams for at least a half, especially Jackson State.
Ask FAMU.
Correct. My point proven. So if you're Jackson State coming off of what could be maybe a win against FAMU or should be a win against FAMU, you don't want to get caught in that trap in the second weekend of November, which is the most important month of football, to lose to Mississippi Valley.
All right, and then they got Alcorn at the very end, and so tell me, 11 games, record prediction already, or do you want to hold that right now?
I'm going to hold that.
You're going to hold that.
Yes.
All right. Good 15 minutes of football, but for the last 5 minutes, I really want to talk about basketball real quick. Okay. Men and women both having relatively good starts to the season. Obviously, men faltering a little bit. I wouldn't say, but they're still sitting really pretty where they are. If Deshaun Ruffin continues to improve coming off this injury and everything, I mean, look, he's the most dynamic player probably in the conference on any given day. I mean, it's not often you get a McDonald's All-American in the SWAC, So I think they're really good there. What's been really impressive with the women for me is there was a big concern, and there was even skepticism with Coach Richards that, was she the right person for Jackson State? Well, you know what? It was not going to be an undefeated season this year. I'm sorry. You didn't have Coach Reed and the squad and the WNBA type players that you had in past years. But I'll say I would feel really good if I was a fan.
Oh, absolutely. No, if you're a Jackson State fan and you're a big Jackson State basketball fan, you really have to be pleased at what you're seeing on both sides. I mean, this is a coach and Coach Richard and she's told me, and she's obviously said it publicly, is that there were people and there were other people that doubted this Jackson State team and what they were going to be able to do. But all they've been able to do is put together, wins, obviously after a tough non-conference schedule. But when I recently talked to Coach Richard, she talked about the fact that non-conference schedule really prepared them, help them build that continuity for some of the success that you're seeing them display on the court in SWAC play. And so, granted, things haven't necessarily been fully perfect, and there's still some kinks to still be worked out. But this is a team that no one probably thought at the end of February or at the end of January going into February that Jackson State will be amongst the top 3, top 4 teams on the women's side when it comes to SWAC basketball. And of course, on the men's side, you kind of, you hit the nail on the coffin with, with Deshaun Ruffin. Granted, some of these last couple games, I know that Bethune-Cookman game, I think was the one that he dropped 37. But outside of his scoring, I think beyond the scoring portion of Deshaun Ruffin, just his playmaking ability, his play on the court to be able to set up his other teammates, his vision. I think that's the part that I really, really love about his game because, yes, we know he's obviously an undersized guard, but when he's on the court, it almost feels like he's a giant amongst being an undersized guard because of the way he's able to still get to the rim and finish on layups, get to the free throw line, get the ball and distribute it to his teammates. And so literally Jackson State, on the men's side, they are a program that goes as Deshaun goes, but they have so many other players, like obviously Romel in the paint, Shannon Grant, I think who's going to be very important for them going down the stretch. And then Dorian, obviously a sharpshooter from beyond the arc and can just score anywhere on the court. I really like what I'm seeing from Jackson State men's basketball team, and I think they have a chance to really make some noise as they continue to go throughout the month of February and into March.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt right now that Southern is obviously the best team in the conference at the moment.
Absolutely.
It is what it is. I mean, they have proven it that their record says so. I mean, you win games.
And not only that, and granted, obviously Jackson State lost to Southern yesterday, that 2-point loss in overtime, which, to some it was about a questionable call. But I think that when you look at Southern, this is a team that we were talking about this on another show. They're not the pretty sexy team. They have 5 guys. No one's, for the most part, scoring double-digit production, but they're winning games. And at the end of the day, that's the most important part.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of funny to me. I guess Texas Southern's a little more of the flashy kind of team to me.
Yeah.
Although, you can count on Texas Southern, being there at the end for men's basketball.
Oh, for sure.
You could just, I don't even need to see the roster.
For sure.
We'll see him at the end of the season. I think it's so funny, though. The last thing is every time I watch Jackson State men's basketball, I just think of Mo Williams and how he played. And he obviously recruits guards that just look like him. I mean, it's the funniest thing to me. I mean, I think the guard that most reminds me of Mo Williams is Hunt, actually. I just think he's got so much Mo in him. It's so funny to me.
No, he definitely has the Mo mannerisms. Even Deshaun and some of the other guards.
It's the mannerisms he's got.
Yeah, they do. And but again, you got to think this is a Mo Williams who, obviously played for an NBA title, played with LeBron James, has had success at the highest level, obviously hooped at Alabama and the SEC. So this, for a coach like him coaching a program like Jackson State, these players really do have someone to look up to if they want to potentially be able to get to the next level. And that says something, especially in today's landscape when we start talking about what basketball looks like and how the game is continuing to change.
Well, you going to join me every Tuesday?
I am, Blake. I'm going to be here every Tuesday.
Okay, that's my plan. I mean, if we can find a good time. Hopefully there's no Luka news next week that can overshadow everything. I forgot there was a Super Bowl.
Okay. Because I'm thinking, you look on, ESPN and every other platform, you're like, it's Luka Doncic to the Lakers. It's Anthony Davis to the Mavericks. What does this look like? Is this going to happen? I'm thinking, oh, wow, everybody is flocking to New Orleans for the Super Bowl, and Kendrick Lamar is preparing for a concert.
Not often, this is good for the NBA. I mean, I don't watch that. I don't watch that much anymore. But I'm going to be tuning into that first Laker game where LeBron and Luka are both on the court. I got to see him dome that purple and gold.
No, for sure. Don't forget trade deadline is Thursday. By the way, NBA trade.
There you go, Will, and go follow him on Twitter and all the Instagram and all that. And don't forget to follow this TikTok, my TikTok as well, the Magnolia Shine podcast as well, where we post highlights of kids. Commentary, all kinds of stuff. But that's the Magnolia Shine podcast, the Jackson State Report, and we'll see you next Tuesday.